Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today, I'll be talking about people pleasing and how we can rewire this part of ourselves. Um, first, if you happen to be a fearful, avoidant, or anxious attachment, likely you go around people pleasing and abandoning yourself. So I want to walk you through just clear steps on how to start rewiring this programming that you may have. I feel like there's a lot of content out there that talks about, oh, just stop abandoning yourself. And it's like, okay, well, how? Okay, so the first step is identify times in your life where you felt like you were abandoning yourself. And what that might look like is kind of staying in a situation that was uncomfortable or maybe crossing your boundaries. But instead of you like standing up for yourself or getting out of that situation, you ended up just kind of going along with it to keep the peace. So that's like a cornerstone um like feature of what people pleasing would look like. So it's like, putting yourself last so that everyone else can be okay. And that's just, if you want to dive deeper into attachment style, you can investigate that. Because it makes sense, you're making sure everyone else is okay so that you will be okay. Because if other people aren't okay around you, there's gonna be like chaos and then, you know, you're not gonna be able to survive. So this programming is designed to, protect us and keep us alive because it's just what we've gone around doing and what we've grown to know. Um, so the first step is identifying times where you did feel that way, where I was like, okay, this person was treating me like crap. And then instead of me like standing up for myself, I just kind of like laughed it off and tried to be the easygoing person. And that is such a like common thing that people will do. And I feel like that's a common thing with women too, because it's like we're taught early on, like, oh, you have to be polite and perfect for other people and accommodating, like you don't want to be too much and and I'm going through and thinking about all the times, where I'm like, okay, when did I start like abandoning myself and just people pleasing, and I do it all the time, to be honest. So, um, yeah, I feel like there was a lot of just like there I'm too much. Like if I stand up for myself, like I'm too much. Like that's kind of a core belief. Um, but in order to rewire all this, because ideally you want to think that you like your feelings and everything, it's not too much. Like people are emotional creatures and you're allowed to feel that way. So okay. So once you notice, and maybe I'll give you a couple examples so that you can try to identify your end. So there's an example I was kind of thinking about, and it wasn't that obvious. And so like I was in a car with this one of my like acquaintances or like friends from the gym, and so I don't really like know him that well and like not the best of friends. It's just like I wanted to support my team and yada yada yada. And it was like I don't know if you guys have like experienced where like the guy just does not listen at all. Like, but then he'll like, and I think his heart is in the right place. So I'm not trying to like bash him, but he was just nonstop, like, and like hyper. And like, I think he's just, I don't know, like overthinking a lot. Cause then he'll say something like totally random and be like, oh, do you think that's weird? Do you think that's weird? And it's like, okay, like you're allowed to be who you are. Like, and I feel like sometimes because I am pretty like not non-judgmental and like easygoing, people tend to just like kind of let this stuff out. So he was very just like self-conscious about everything. And it was just exhausting because I had to hang out with him for hours. And I was just like, I mean, he'd try to ask me like a deep question too, and then it would like he'd ask it and then I start answering and then he just like completely cuts me off. Oh, I used to have that Ferrari. Oh, I used to have that. And it's like, okay, I'm just gonna shut up now. And so I was thinking about it. I was like, and towards the end of the night, because like, and he was even like nitpicking little things that I would do. Like I took off my bracelet and he was like, why'd you take that off? I was like, I don't know, dude. Like, and it was just like every little thing. Oh my God. Um, and I noticed that when I just would respond in a very direct way, like there was like a moment where he like asked me a question and then I just go, no. And I just like flat out said no. And then his response to it was like, oh, like he was like taken aback. And it's like, that wasn't like me being mean. It was just me saying like bluntly, like, no. Um, and yeah, I ended up like just not really engaging much at the end because I was just like exhausted. But then, um, actually, I take that back. Like for the most part, I was. But then I just started talking about because he was asking me like something. Yeah, he literally told me not to talk about like when I was saying how I had to get the order of protection and stuff, and he's like, "Well, you don't want to talk about it." And then like he like completely cut me off. And I wasn't even like trying to talk about it. I was trying to talk about the next steps that I had to go through. But I mean, so what I'm thinking, later, like in the moment and later, I'm like, okay, was I really abandoning myself? Like over explaining and so I think there were moments where I was abandoning myself because I kept like over explaining and then like repeating or like actually I wasn't really repeating, he was doing a lot of the repeating, but I was like when he had asked me something to about what I was like interested in and I was like trying to explain about the attachment style and then he just completely missed the point. And then he's like, "Well, being vulnerable is fine." And then he starts talking about all this like trauma that he went through and I was like, "Okay, that's like literally not the point that I was making with talking about attachment um styles." So it was very exhausting. Um, so I think, I did say like at a point where I was like, "Well, do you want to know?" And then I like tried to explain it, but I think like being able to discern, okay, does this person even have capacity to listen to the words coming out of your mouth? Like, and if I were to have to be in a situation where I'm like near him or whatever, I think next time I'm just going to be very like not really engaged. I'm not going to be mean because I think he's got a good heart and everything. And um, but I think so that was like something that I noticed, and that's like pretty subtle because it's like, and also you're kind of like the situation is a little bit different because we're like stuck in the car, so it's not like I can be like, I don't like how he's treating me. Bye. Like just leave. Um so yeah, like I think being aware of that, like so I think just like taking that example, acknowledging like where in my head was I thinking like, okay, is he actually listening? Like, so I think I just have to be a little bit better at like stop explaining what you're trying to explain. And like, if he's going to cut you off, you don't need to revisit it. Like, he's obviously not going to have the capacity to listen to you. So just stop and that's fine. It's not like I was like hurt by it. I think it was just more so like exhausting because he's putting all this like insecurity onto me like, oh, do you think this is weird? And it's like, oh my God. And I feel for him. And honestly, I hope he discovers attachment theory because I think it would be helpful for him. Okay. So then another example of people pleasing. So if you are, and I'm sure like a lot of families, maybe um you feel like you're always people pleasing there. Like, I came from like a big family, and so just like trying to keep the peace and all this stuff. And like, so I'm usually, I mean, growing up and like for as long as I can remember, up until like more recently, I feel like I was more so like, okay, make sure this person's okay, make sure that person. I was never checking in with myself. It was always about the other people. And so what that can look like in other relationships or whatever, or maybe when you're an adult and going back into family dynamics, um, or interactions, like are you still just checking on everyone else but you? Or, are you starting to just like keep your distance when someone's not like acting appropriately? Um, so yeah, I guess I'll just like leave with the point about, you know, kind of like fawn responses, like different types of responses that it could look like. Fawning is kind of like a people pleasing thing. I do that a lot with like guys, and it's not like intentional. And there was a moment where I was like at a networking thing, and then we met up. I did all the scoping for proposal that I wanted to pitch like for my side business. And then so this guy, he was probably like 10 years younger than me too. And it was just like, okay, he ended up just like trying to hit on me probably. But in the moment, it was like, okay, we're standing in line and he was kind of getting really close. And then like I remember like looking back, I was like, okay, that's when I started feeling uncomfortable. And then but I like stayed, I like basically froze. So like the freezing and then the fawning. So I like froze pretty much. And then we sit down, we like get tea or whatever. And then I'm like talking about the proposal and the services that I would provide. And then at some point, like, because I don't know what I was wearing, honestly. I think uh, it was like something professional. I think it was a dress. But then um, he like came over, like it sat closer to me, and then he ends up putting his hand on my bare leg. And then I literally was froze. And so I just like, kind of like eventually just like was like trying to get back to the like I remember I was just like talking about the topic and like kind of ignored that. And it like just was weird. And yeah, and so that was definitely like people pleasing. And I think, so for number one, the step, like noticing, so here I'm like identifying these different situations where I do abandon myself, and then oftentimes like with guys, like I feel like I'm like super uncomfortable, and then I go into this like fawning and like freezing. And but if I'm in like, the family dynamics or whatever, I'm in the like taking care of other people. So there's like different modes that I'll go into, but they're all like falling under the people pleasing category. And so once you notice it, then you can think about, and I think this is important too, like visualization. So what could I have said that could have put a boundary right there? I could have been like, let's keep it professional. And I mean, that's not too hard to say. And just like, and I think on your end, maybe have like a couple phrases where, you find yourself in these situations. What can you say that's going to help you lay the boundary very clearly and just like matter of factly, just to lay the ground. And once you kind of visualize it and think about what you can say, then step number two. So once you're in these different situations, that's when you can start actually picking up on it. And so you're like in the situation with the guy, and then in the moment, you're like, okay, this feels uncomfortable. Like you feel it in your body, you feel like tightening, and then like your heart starts racing, and you're like, okay, this is a moment where I'm experiencing these signs, um, where I'm uncomfortable. What needs to happen next? And I think just like kind of pausing and thinking about it, like, what do I need next? How do I lay down this boundary? And that's when you can tap into like what you practiced before, like with your visualization. Um, and the third piece is actually consistency. So because this is a deep seated attachment pattern, it's not going to be as simple as like a little daily pattern that you might try to change. So I think it will be a little bit longer, and it could be, I was looking at different like studies and stuff like that. So like the average time could be like a couple months or something like that. But I think taking into consideration the deep rooted pattern behavior, I think it's just going to take a little bit more time for it to become um, actual like proof and evidence that it's going to be okay. So I think it's going to be a little bit like resistance and like uncertainty and like uncomfortable while you're first executing it. And maybe, it's not, it doesn't take up to a year to like start feeling comfortable doing it. So I think it totally like depends on your mind state and like how you're interpreting all these changes and stuff like that. So that all ties into it. But yeah, I think all of this evidence is going to provide proof that, okay, I can stand up for myself and I will actually still be okay and I'll survive. And so that's what's going to help reprogram your subconscious mind and the survival instinct that has ruled your life up until this point where you started your journey. And so with that, yeah, I really appreciate you guys. And if you have any comments or anything you want to share too, because I know mine were kind of like just specific to me, um, you guys probably have like totally other, experiences and strategies. So I'd love to hear that. And if there's anything else that you want me to cover, please let me know. You can DM me or message in the comments. Okay. Bye.